And welcome to Newsnight. I am Lanre Lasese. Now, as Nigeria works to increase foreign direct investment into the country and build up the economy, one area that has been contributing to this effort are free trade zones. These are specific areas within the country where goods can be imported, manufactured, and re-exported with minimal involvement of customs authorities. These zones were created to encourage economic activity, attract foreign investment, and enhance exports. But how well have these zones attracted the needed inflow of funds? Are these zones serving their purposes, and what can be done to improve their viability? I had an interesting discussion with Dr. Olufemi Ogunyemi, Managing Director of Nigeria Export Processing Zones Authority. Thank you for having us. I think I would like to first have you give me like a brief.
Okay.
Tell me about the NEPZA.
NEPZA, Nigeria Export Processing Zones Authority. It's an agency of government, of the federal government, under the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. And the agency's main mandate is to license, establish, support, and regulate free trade zones in Nigeria.
Okay. So how well has this been going? How well?
Well, the NEPZA, the agency came into formation in 1992
Okay.
through the NEPZA Act. It has been going well. It has been going well, but probably a bit slow. Other African countries that set up free trade zones after Nigeria have probably been a bit more successful in the road to meet the objectives. But it's going well. It can be improved upon. Free trade zones first started way back in 1959, when one was formed at Shannon Airport in Ireland, and the whole idea is just to give tax exemptions, duty waivers, help support provide infrastructure, and make it easy for certain businesses in that airport, Shannon Airport, easy for them to do business. But since that time, China, India, even England and the USA have all employed the concept of a free trade zone scheme to try and promote industrialization and create employment. Like I said, the idea was mooted in Nigeria around 1992. That's over 30 years ago. Started with the first 2 free trade zones in Nigeria, which are government-owned, which we manage. So not only are we regulators, we're also operators. That's the Calabar Free Trade Zone, which is the very first one in Nigeria, and the Kano Free Trade Zone. Mm-hmm. But yes, it's doing well. It can do better, and it will do better.
Okay, so I'm looking at the name of the authorities, Export Processing Zones. So it's not just free trade zones.
Actually, Export Processing Zone, in my opinion, is a misnomer. It was the name, the title given way back in 1992, where the focus was an enclave specifically to promote and process export. But over the past 30 years, the concept has changed. Everybody was using that term around at that time. But soon, they started calling them free trade zones because it opened up some other possibilities. And many countries, by legislature, changed their titles to free trade zone. But even then, that has even become old-fashioned because they're not free. They pay for these licenses, they pay tariffs, they pay duties when they export in the customs territory. So it's actually a misnomer to call them free trade zones. The correct title is special economic zones because they're now diverse beyond just exports. They're now diverse in other fields, and their focus is not just on exports. So the term around the world now, globally, I mean, it's a global scheme. It's not just Nigeria. It's to use the term special economic zones.
Okay, now, so what's the special benefit? Because at least when the concept, from my understanding, was a free trade zone, it appeared it was a way of getting people to come in, give them special incentives, which is outside what they would have gotten within
the customs territory
or the country outside that zone,
yes.
and then to encourage them to help drive up production.
Absolutely.
Now, if you're now saying it's not a free trade zone, what's the difference? What makes it attractive?
Good. The word free has its own attachment, so it's not completely free.
Okay.
They are there to attract investors into Nigeria.
Yes.
If you are an investor abroad and you have some money, you want to come and invest it, you think your business, your manufacturing, especially, will succeed in Nigeria, you obviously need to come into Nigeria, the customs territory. But we create these zones to try and attract you that you can come in, we can provide infrastructure for you, we can help make it, we create a one-stop shop whereby all government agencies will come through NEPZA to interact with you, and vice versa. We give you duty waivers so that your initial capital can be focused on developing your business. There are waivers, there are duties you will pay if you start exporting into Nigeria.
Okay.
And then we give you a number of tax incentives as well. That is what attracts the FDI.
Okay.
That's what attracts the FDI. And it's important for Nigeria to be competitive in this area, because if we are not, our neighboring countries will get all the FDI.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so let me take you back to, you mentioned Calabar.
Yes.
You mentioned Kano as the starting point. How are we doing now?
Calabar and Kano are actually doing very well.
But how many zones do we have right now?
Right now, we have about 55, maybe 56 zones, to be exact. It's, again, that can be misleading, because since I took up this appointment, about 20 or so zones are actually not operational. And that can skew the figures. For instance, in Dubai, they have a total of about 44 zones, I think. And in Kenya, probably about 32, 33 zones. So it's not, having said that, in Dubai, one zone has about 5,000 enterprises, companies under it. Okay. I think one of our zones, the highest number of companies under is like 85. So it's misleading when you say you have 56 zones, and a big chunk of them are actually not working for various reasons, which we're going to be addressing this year. Okay,
but if you now say which ones are working, where do we seem to be getting it right?
Look, our most successful zones are, I have to admit, they're all over the country, but our most successful zones are in the Lagos axis. And I put it down to the foresight of our President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, when he was governor of Lagos State. A huge stretch of land mass along the coastline had been earmarked to be a free trade zone. If you remember, at the time he was governor, this was soon after we had established the NEPZA Act. It was around that time. So the concept of export processing zones, free trade zones was very much alive. And he had created this area. And over the years, this area has been demarcated into certain zones. I'll tell you what they are. Lekki Free Trade Zone, which is jointly owned, 40% owned by the Lagos State government, 60% owned by the Chinese government. Lagos Free Trade Zone, which is owned by the titles can be a misnomer. Lagos Free Trade Zone is not owned by Lagos State. Okay. It's owned by a Singaporean family, the Tolerant Group, who have just spent $70 million to purchase Guinness from Diageo. Again, that's a measure of their success. Lagos Free Trade Zone, then there's Dangote Refinery as well in that axis. And there's a diverse zone called Alaro City, getting closer to Ekpe. Those are very successful free trade zones in that axis. Of course, you start coming westwards, you get to Ogun, which is 20% the Ogun State government and then the Chinese government. And as you go around the country, we do have other zones as well. We have AHL Energy in Delta State. And you have the sugar factory, the Bundu Free Trade Zone, which deals with sugar, also on the Midwest side. We have our one and only agro-processing zone, Sabore, in Adamawa State. And we're establishing other zones that are in various stages of development all over the country.
Okay, so before I'll take the next question, but I want to understand this. When you say it's owned by 40% Lagos State, what part does the Nigerian government play? it's under the federal government. The free trade zones are under the federal government.
They're under
when you say they're owned by owned by this, where does the federal
a free trade zone, just like here and all over the world, can have three ownership structures.
Okay.
One, fully private. You can have a big chunk of land, you have a lot of money, you have a manufacturing idea or investment process, and you make an application. President will declare your area, land, as a free trade zone.
Okay.
NEPZA will then implement the handshake, the incentive we're going to give you and what we expect in return. NEPZA will then implement it. Part of the reward for government is that you are going to be paying some tariffs. In your free trade zone, you cannot bring in small companies that we call enterprises, who are smaller investors that will operate in your free trade zone, of which you will also implement tariffs and all that. So you try to build up your free trade zone. So it's an investment for you. We call them all investors. That's one. The second group of ownership, the second structure of ownership is public and private partnerships. Now, with the public and private partnership, the public part is really the state government. That's why I said 20% owned by Lagos state government, Ogun state percentage. And there's some other states as well that have some state ownership as well. And then the third one is the fully public free trade zones. And the two main ones are the ones that we own, the federal government own, you own, Nigeria owns, Calabar Free Trade Zone and Kano Free Trade Zone.
Now, it appears the states can play a large role in the success of this.
Yes, the states, in their drive to create employment, to industrialize their state, especially in this current mode where there's a drive towards agriculture, a lot of them are expressed significant interest in two things. One, smart cities. The governor of Kwara State, if I can make some mention of some states, has invited NEPZA to Ilorin in the launching of the concept of a smart city. This is a global concept. So some of the state governors are interested in smart cities, but most importantly, they're also interested in agro-processing zones. Now they want to, when you say they're interested, they want to take advantage of the tax incentives, the duty waivers, even free trade zones. To make it easy for them to succeed, we actually do not permit any union activity for 10 years so that they can thrive. So these are part of the advantages that attracts them. So like agro-processing zones now, they don't want to just export ginger or sesame or cassava. They want to add value to it. And they have found that it can create employment, it can have a lot of benefits being in a free trade zone. So there's been a lot of inquiries from state governments regarding free trade zones.
Okay, so let me get down to what I think a lot of people want to know.
Yeah.
Money. At the end of the day, the export processing zones, all these invitation, having a place where people can come in is trying to raise revenue. How well are these zones doing that department?
Now, there are a lot of tariffs. In fact, NEPZA has just reviewed its tariffs that I'm going to make public and send to the zones. For the past 10 years, we have not reviewed our tariffs, so it's long overdue. We charge for many things. Let me just take a simple thing like you apply to get a free trade zone.
Yes.
Your application comes in. I have to send a team from NEPZA to go and look at your land and assess the feasibility of your plan. That's going to cost money. Now, let's say a free trade zone is operational. For instance, Lekki Deep Sea Port is an enterprise under a free trade zone. So it's an enterprise under Lagos Free Trade Zone.
Yes.
When containers come in, there are going to be charges. Customs are there. They have to inspect it. So there are fees. Yes. These are among the many fees. There's a long list of tariffs, which is part of why I say it's not free. That all these operators, the zone operators, there's a zone management company, all of them have to pay. That's where the money comes from, the IGR that is generated that we pay into the government coffers. Yes.
Yes, but how well is that going?
That's going very well.
Like how much are we seeing from the free trade zone?
One of the successful free trade zones that I mentioned earlier declared 40 billion last year in the first think it was 6 or 9 months, 40 billion naira to customs only, to customs. And in that first 6 months of last year, I hate quoting figures because they're never accurate.
They keep moving. They can move.
But we remitted probably about 8 or 9 billion naira to the federal government coffers from NEPZA directly the first 6 months of last year. Now, that's not, we have a lot of revenue we bring into the government that is not captured directly. The figures quoted by SON, Standards Organization of Nigeria, they get money, they get revenue from the free trade zones.
Which you can't count under your own.
No, they declared. But I have now, we are the same sister agency, in fact, he sent me a text this morning, how we can capture that figure. So at least we can use it a little bit to show that this is part of what we're helping to generate.
Okay.
It's not coming from us directly, but it's coming from us indirectly. Okay. Even the customs figures that is being displayed, the one I said 40 billion in the first...
They beat their yearly projections.
A chunk of it, a percentage of it, has come from these free trade zones. Same with NAFTA. They are there. They generate revenue as well. And in a smaller way, even the immigration service generates it. So it's not entirely free. The revenue we're generating is for all of us. We're all working for the same president, the same government, but it goes to different agencies. And sometimes NEPZA is underestimated in the amount of money that they generate for Nigeria.
Okay, in terms of the money you get from the federal government, how is that going?
From the federal government?
Yes, I mean to do your own work as
which we are like everybody else, we want more. We get the standard envelope that most agencies get. I'm not going to quote any figures, but we always have a supplementary budget that is higher than that. It's important that we drive the infrastructure in our free trade zone because that's what's going to attract. Remember what I said, you are a businessman in Turkey or India, and you want to come to Nigeria. There's a huge market in Nigeria. There's a youthful population that are technologically savvy. You are too nervous to go into the customs territory. You don't know anybody in Nigeria. A free trade zone will be ideal for you. But we have to provide that infrastructure for you. So we have to make sure you have a good road network, you have transport logistics, that is easy for you to, you don't know anybody in Nigeria, so how are you going to interact with SON? Or NAFTA, it has to come through NEPZA. So these are all the things we do. So we're always asking for more funds to help develop the infrastructure.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I think one of the challenges I understand some of these zones have, and you've mentioned some of them are not functioning, they come back and say it's also sometimes due to the fact that infrastructure is not on ground. So how is that to be handled? Well, because we're trying to make it competitive, we're trying to bring them in, but it appears we're not doing or putting on ground one of the guarantees that we say we'll do to bring them in.
Well, we are bringing them in. Infrastructure development will take time.
Yes.
And also, even when we have funds, there's a procurement process in this country that I know with the new directorate at the Bureau of Public Procurement, it's going to get better. Let me just put it like that. There's that process. We are working on making things better for the... You see, if it's a private zone, the onus on the infrastructure is on them.
Yes.
But we'll still support, in linking them with agencies, but the onus is on them. But especially the public, private, and the public zones, we are responsible for providing the infrastructure, and we are doing so, and we'll continue to do so.
Okay, let me take you on the issue of legal disputes.
Yes.
Because I understand there are some legal disputes, land and all that. How are you handling that?
Well, NEPZA is supposed to be the mediator in resolving a lot of these disputes. If we're not able to, or if the parties choose individually, they may decide to go outside to the judiciary, to the justice system, in which case we take a step back and we follow the decisions of the judiciary. There has been a number of issues, usually with land compensation for the host communities. Some of the land issues that we are directly involved in, I recently authorized payment of compensation to landowners in the Lekki axis. That has been going on for a while. They need to be compensated when you take their land to be used for certain purposes. So we are resolving them. There's still probably one or two issues going on whereby a state government has given land, another state government comes and adds another part to it, or the same land that was given part of it, that's already a free trade zone, is given to a particular company. So these disputes arise, even outside free trade zone. Yes. They are normal disputes when it comes to real estate and landed property. But I believe we're handling them well in conjunction with the Ministry of Justice, and we do have concessions out to certain legal firms to assist in the process. Since I've been here, we have resolved a couple of cases. Yes.
Okay, now you mentioned the very interesting part, the issue of community. Usually, when you hear about companies, foreign companies coming in to do or establish,
yes,
there's always this thing about community relations, and also what do they bring back, CSR, as you said.
Yes.
How are you handling that, and how is that going?
Very important. This concept of CSR is enshrined in the agreement we have, the free trade zones.
Okay. Has it always been, or is something you're...
It has always been.
Okay.
But it's something that I've been really emphasizing on when I travel around the zones and I inspect the zones, to enforce and ensure that they are doing it. Now, personally, the concept of CSR, corporate social responsibility, again, in my opinion, and it's been for years, is a misnomer. For a start, corporate and social responsibility are contradictory. Those two things are contradictory. A corporation is focused on maximizing profits for a shareholder, not on social responsibility. That's one. Two, it's voluntary and doesn't show any accountability. You can go to a particular community. Let me say you go to a particular community and you teach them how to fish. You can. That's a metaphor. You can use that for anything. You go and do something. You teach them to do something. You teach them how to fish, and you go. You give them some nets to fish, and you go. You've done your CSR. So it's not quite correct. And also, if you go and do you as an individual, sir, go and do something in the community that another company has also done, if they do it, it's called corporate social responsibility. But when you do it, what's it called? You are not a corporate body.
No, you're not.
You are an individual. So that's why this corporate social responsibility, to me, is not quite accurate. And the most accurate term that we want to achieve is community social regeneration. Yes.
Okay, so how is that working out in the free trade zones, especially with companies? And
it's working out because they have to do it. Okay. It's in the agreement. Okay. If they don't, we can suspend their license.
Okay.
Yes, we can suspend when it's time for renewal every year. It's something we should be able to measure, and they're not doing it. But they are doing it, but they're not making it public. Let me tell you how they're doing it. There are a number of free trade zones where they're carrying out primary school education. They have built small schools and they're encouraging education. They're having training programs. They're doing it in primary health care. They're taking care of blood pressure, hypertension, eye tests, basic primary health care things, and also maternal and child health. Well, they're not measuring it. It should be increasing. It should be measurable. It should be publishable. It should be able to be transparent so that people can see it. And that's what I've been encouraging them to do. And they must do it. And I'm going to increase that this year because it's part of it's a handshake.
Yes.
It's a handshake. I agree to give you this. You must agree in return to give us employment. The technology you bring for your factories, whenever you decide you are retiring or folding up, this technology must stay. Train our staff, employ Nigerians, train them, the vocational skills, the unskilled, the semi-skilled, the professionals, they must be trained. And of course, develop your host communities. And evidence of this, that this is going on is that at least since my tenure, there has been harmony everywhere. You have not seen any disturbance.
That's what I was about to ask. Because most times that's the first sign that something is wrong.
There's something wrong with the host community. So don't go there as an investor, as a zone investor, and think, well, I'm giving them employment because they live around me. That's all. you must do some community regeneration.
Okay, so the communities have a way of feedback to you.
Yes.
As NEPZA.
Well, you know we have a zone administrator in every zone.
Okay.
The way I just dramatize, I like to dramatize with my medical background, is if you when we all go to weddings, you are in the hall of the wedding. That's Nigeria. Each table, let's say a table, there are big tables, there are small tables. There are tables serving jollof rice, another one serving amala. Each table is a free trade zone, doing different things. And if you know, each of those tables usually have a young lady or a young man standing as an usher. Those are zone administrators. We post zone administrators to every zone to see what's going on that table and around that table.
I want to talk about, we're looking at the issue of the free trade zones, how it is they're working, how we can get them better. Now, one of the things I understand is there have been issues of transparency and accountability, how to ensure that inflows are clear, there's no way they're cutbacks and things like that. How is the authority handling that issue?
As that sort of issue in any organization, the simplest way of dealing with that is to digitalize.
Okay.
You capture accurate data that has a timestamp, a location stamp, an identity stamp. So it's clear, it's obvious who has entered it. It's digital, it cannot be changed, cannot be deleted, and it can be accessed by different people at different locations at different times. This is what's going on around the world. I remember some 15 years ago when the US government said all clinics and medical providers, service providers must be digitalized, submit all their patient records requesting for money. You must submit it digitally, not by paper. Within 6 months, we all did. Everybody did, because you're not going to get paid. So everything had to be digitalized. That's what we need to do here regarding free trade zones. Now, as you know, there are a number of free trade zones scattered all over the country. These free trade zones have enterprises working under them, companies. So it's not enough, for instance, for NEPZA alone to be digitalized. The zone operators themselves will have to be digitalized. The enterprises working under them will have to be digitalized. We're not quite there yet, but NEPZA has started. Just a few days ago, we have signed an agreement with the company to digitalize NEPZA, e-NEPZA as we call it. It's taken many months to come to an agreement between NEPZA and that company, but we finally did, and we signed an agreement. I believe they said within 30 days, the platform should be operational. Those are the advantages of being digitalized. Like I said, you can capture accurate data, the export data, all the CSR data, the financial data. It will plug leakages as well, because everything has to be. So I'm hoping and I'm praying that when this digitalized platform, I'm trying to encourage the zones and the enterprises to follow suit. I'm trying to encourage them to do that. And I'm hopeful that within 12 months or so, we should be able to capture and get the transparency and the accountability that you mentioned. Now, apart from the digital side, of course, we're accountable to the ministry, and we're accountable to the president to conform and help the president fulfill his 8-point agenda, his renewed hope agenda. So yes, we are we're accountable to the regulatory agencies. We are constantly getting requests from the various regulatory agencies, ICPC, EFCC, on various issues regarding the work that we do. So yes, transparency and accountability is there and can always be better.
Okay, but what about your other sister agencies?
Oh, that's a good point. The good thing about digitalization is you can interface with them. Nigeria Customs has an excellent digital setup. And right now, I've had a discussion with the Comptroller General of Customs on this. I've written him a letter to get some of his team to come to this office and help us seal a good interface, digital interface with NEPZA and Customs. I think they are probably our most important partner in that they are stationed everywhere and they must see whatever is coming to the country. You know, when I was visited Dubai, there's a seamless, super smooth operation between the customs in the UAE and the free zone, the Special Economic Zone Authority in the UAE. Seamless, and that's exactly what I want in Nigeria. To generate revenue and to make it easy for our investors to import and export.
Okay, now, you, at the beginning, you had already mentioned the misnomer in the name.
Yes.
And I understand the legislation around this was since the inception. It appears there's not been. Is there any plans to amend, put in some of this new, like the name?
Yes.
Name change.
The name change. Yeah. Personally, I wish there was a way we could just do the name change right away without having to amend the whole bill entirely.
The act and all.
We have. Once I got here, about 16 months ago, the first few months we focused on drafting a revised bill.
Okay.
The current bill, it satisfies a lot of things, but it's outdated. There are some processes that have changed. But most importantly, the term Export Processing Zone Authority, again, is a misnomer. I explained this on the public committee when I was having a discussion with the vice president, and he was very interested. I said, anytime I go to meetings abroad, the first 3 minutes of my conversation, when they see my ID, is to explain NEPZA. They don't understand what is NEPZA. Then I have to talk about export processing zones, and they say, and I wasted 3-4 minutes of the time to interact with the foreign investor, explaining who I am and what I do. Meanwhile, they're all used to. So the vice president asked me, what should it be? And I said, sir, special economic zones, because that's what they are. For instance, a tourist area, a tourist zone, something like Tinapa, for instance, although it's going to be, hopefully we're going to get it fully operational very soon.
Oh, really?
Yes. Oh, yes. I've been particularly determined working with the Cross River government to get Tinapa up and running. That's a tourist zone. It's not an export processing zone. Mm-hmm. You know, we have some zones around the airport, the economic zone. Co-Atlantic has diverse things going on in there. It's not just an export processing zone. And we're now setting up the very first digital free zone in sub-Saharan Africa, in Alao City. So the term export processing is inadequate. So the term and our new revised bill is the Special Economic Zones Commission Bill 2024-2025. We're about to send, we've sent copies to stakeholders. The Minister of Justice is involved. Of course, the legislature is the one that's going to pass the bill eventually. Yeah. Where we thought maybe an executive bill, but those are issues that I'm letting the experts handle. Okay. But the documents, the rules and regulations, the bill is ready. And we pray that it will be passed very soon by the National Assembly.
Okay, but I'm interested in the Tinapa one. Because for a lot of Nigerians, it's one that looked like it was going to open up Nigeria on a global scale. And then it appeared it just went down. So it's interesting to hear that it will soon. I don't know how soon.
Let's put it like this. Tinapa is a perfect example of why a number of free trade zones in the country are not operational, especially when they involve state government. A state governor is excited, sets up a free trade zone. It's an APC member. The next government for that state becomes a PDP government, or vice versa. Or even in the same party, the next governor may not be totally favorable of the free trade zone concept. So it's not consistent. The interest, the focus on developing the zone is not consistent. But they forget one thing. It's in the agreement. They must pay annual licensing renewal fees. And this can be up to $60,000. See, again, I tell you, it's not free. So this just accumulates. And before you know it, 10 years has passed. And when I came on, a number of state governments, of course, I'm not going to mention any names, or a number of state governments and the zones they're responsible for, they have a large debt. And their license is suspended. Some have come to me to ask, to NEPZA, to ask for waivers. I cannot waive federal government money. And those are issues I've been discussing with my previous honorable minister and I'm discussing with my current minister. I've worked out a platform to help them. Some states, even if you ask them to pay a percentage, they can't afford it. Some are owing $780,000, $600,000 because it's in the agreement. And they just let it sit for years and it piles up. That is one reason. Others are security reasons. The business structure falls apart. So there are many reasons why Tinapa has not succeeded. But I've met with the deputy governor of Cross River, and I've assured him, almost promised him, that we're going to do everything at NEPZA. The general manager of Tinapa has been working with us at NEPZA to try and find a way of resolving the debt issue and give them all the support to get Tinapa up and running. And I'm hoping and praying. When I say soon, let me say before the end of this year.
Okay. Before
the end of this year, I should think Tinapa resort should be up and running.
So the present government is interested?
Yes, they are. They are keen. The current governor and government in Cross River State are very keen, and we're working together. Really, when I say working together, even up to last week, we're still working on resolving all the issues to get Tinapa up and running.
Lovely. Now, I understand there are. You spoke about having a very nice working relationship with. There will be customs.
Yes.
And how you're working together. But that's not all. It appears there are other agencies that they are conflicting, and that also is affecting effectiveness.
Yes. When I started my appointment, and I went around and spoke to the zone operators and visited the zones, the number one problem that they complained to me was problems with other agencies.
Okay.
Customs, immigration, Standards Organization of Nigeria, various issues. And a number of these agencies are sister agencies, But I'm happy to report that since that time, since my tenure, we have had great success and collaboration in resolving these issues. Take FRS. Chairman of the FRS was here. We had a meeting right in this office. We've signed a memorandum, and we've set up a 3-way committee between FRS, some zone operators, and NEPZA, where issues can be discussed and resolved. If they're not resolvable at that level, then they can be escalated to the chairman or to me. We've done the same thing with customs, with the CG. We have a tripartite committee that had been there before but was inactive. The Controller General has ordered this to be activated, and we have a 3-way talking shop between customs, zone operators, and NEPZA. And these are beginning to help reduce the tension and the conflicts on the field. Most importantly was the Standards Organization of Nigeria. This is very important because they presented this to me just 3-4 days ago. They have actually created a special seal for special economic zone. It's called SESC. They normally have SUNCAP, MANCAP, and SUNCAP. They've created a special one for special economic zones, and they have digitalized it so that we can interface with it, and it can be all done through a digital interface with SUN, even by the zone operators. They went around with NEPZA, around all the zones with the stakeholders to discuss this, and they presented here in this office on last Thursday the whole user interface, with including the fees and all that. They of course, there's some tariffs involved. I have discussed with the DG of SON. We have looked at these tariffs. I'm about to release the tariffs for NEPZA,
yes.
And we have actually been able to discuss their tariffs and alter it a little bit. This is what they have done with SESCAP, and my personal discussions with the DG is a perfect example how government agencies should collaborate and interact for the benefit of Nigerians. SUN is a prime example of how what we have done to reduce conflict on the field between the agencies and the work of the zone operator. You see, if the zone operators succeed, if they meet their mandates and they do well, it's good for Nigeria because they generate revenue for Nigeria. They will help us to industrialize. They will help us to export. That is why you have to treat them like special babies. But still, they have to provide as well for us. So I'll continue to work on the other problem with conflict with agencies that I found is that they work, customs, FRS, they have their own act.
Yes.
And they have their own rules and instructions, so they're following their act. Even though the NEPZA Act says that we supersede all government activity in a free trade zone.
Okay.
But sometimes this gets lost in the practice. I've discussed this on the PIBIC meeting, the Presidential Ease of Doing Business, Enabling Business Environment Council, of which the Vice President is the chairman. I've discussed this a number of times, and it's a priority for PIBIC for legislative reform. If we look at these different rules directing all these agencies to do their things in a free trade zone, and we reform all this legislation, it will go a long way to resolving the conflicts that the free trade zone operators face.
Okay, I recently also got to understand that operators had some concerns about the proposed tax bill.
Yes.
That is in the works right now. And I'm not clear what their concerns were and how you've been able to handle that.
Well, first of all, we are an agency of government.
Yes.
So I'm not in a position to criticize government. But the group, the association, even individually, the zone operators were alarmed. Even interested foreign direct investment from outside this country had contacted me once these tax reform bills came out. Oh, I want to bring $2 billion to Nigeria. Wait, let me, hold on a second. Let me put the money back in my pocket, find out what's going on. So they did approach me to ask questions. The key concern about the tax reform bill, as it applies to free trade zones, is that the government is trying to look at areas where they can grow revenue, and the free trade zone is considered such a greenfield, such an area that they can get some revenue, and it's right to a certain degree because. You see, when you are in a free trade zone, our act says you can only export 25% of what you produce into the country because it's supposed to be export processing zone,
yes.
That old term. You're supposed to export.
Yes.
So if you are going to export, just 25% should come into Nigeria. That is outside the gates and the fence of your zone, 25%. And whatever comes into Nigeria, you pay back the duty you were waived on all your raw materials and all the one you imported into the free trade zone. It's in the act. You're supposed to repay, which is again what I mean by it's not really a free trade zone.
Yes,
but I guess some operators and some enterprises are not playing by the rules. And sometimes some of them are exporting way above that margin. Now, there is some backing in that later after our act, I think 2004, there was a presidential regulation that allowed them to export 100% into the customs territory. So that 25%, we can do everything here and export it into Nigeria. Again,
on one hand, you understand.
Yes.
You won't have to import from across the Atlantic or whatever, if it's produced in the zone and supplies the country.
Yeah, but there's a problem. On one hand, there's a market in Nigeria.
Yes.
There is demand for it.
Yes.
If you ship it into Nigeria, you don't have to import it, so
yes.
we're saving forex.
Yes.
On one hand.
On one hand.
On the other hand, you have given them all these customs duty waivers and everything. What about the manufacturer inside Nigeria for that same product?
Okay.
You are tilting the playing field against the manufacturers inside the custom territory. But the law had expected that. The law, our NEPZA Act says, if you export, you pay back the duties you were waived. Here's the catch. Maybe some of them are not paying back those duties. Maybe they're exporting to the customs territory, skewing the market, making it disadvantageous to the local manufacturers, and not paying the money thousands, millions that has been waived by the customs duty waivers. This is the key point of the tax reform bill that required reform and a lot of steps to correct this anomaly that's come out in the tax reform bill. That's the basic summary of what the conflict is with the tax reform bill. But I must say, our new minister, because this has come under her watch, some of the investors, especially our new minister, has been in touch and speaking with key stakeholders. She has spoken with the chairman of the FRS, the chairman of the committee, Mr. Oyedele, and even the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. I spoke with Otumba myself on this issue, the president of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, to see how we can make this work for the benefit of Nigerians. But we shall see what the National Assembly passes. The matter was also taken to some key stakeholders in the National Assembly.
Okay.
You know, we have to be competitive. That's my opinion. Yeah.
I also want to understand there are a lot of global economic platforms. How are we taking advantage of that, especially with these concerns that you are having?
Yes. I was elected a couple of months ago on the board of directors of the World Free Zone Organization. And soon after that, I was elected on the platform of NEPZA on the steering committee of the African Economic Zones Organization. Okay. Now, those are organizations where you can leverage on successes from other areas and try to implement and use the same concepts here in Nigeria. That's one. Now, of course, there's also the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We're working closely with the with ECOWAS on this African Continental Free Trade Agreement. In fact, a week or 2 weeks ago, the Secretary General, Mr. Wankele, was here in Abuja and gave a presentation to us, and I was very impressed because we have been following what they call the digital protocols. You see, we're setting up the very first digital free trade zone in sub-Saharan Africa, right here in Nigeria. At Alaro, the land structure for the physical structure is going to be in Alaro City, which is one of our free trade zones. The president, to show his commitment to this digital free trade zone, I'll tell you about it in a second. He set up a committee. I believe he's the chairman of the committee, but the Minister of Finance is the vice chairman of that committee. I'm on the committee. And the company that is responsible for this digital free trade zone, they're also the ones, Neoterra and Itana, they're also the ones handling our NEPZA platform. They are on that committee as well. We've had an inaugural meeting. It was plattered on the front page of some newspapers. Very important plan for the President's Renewed Hope agenda, this digital free trade zone. Why? I'll tell you why. In the US, the state of Delaware is almost entirely a digital free trade zone. You can register a company right here and be doing business in Delaware. Tax-free, duty-free, custom waivers and all that. That's what a digital free trade zone does. And that's what we want to set up here. It's especially important for our small and medium-scale enterprises because it allows them to expose their products to the global market. All they need to do is to be close to it on transport, logistics, a shipping port, an airport, and they're exposed to the global market. Now, to set up a digital free trade zone, you have to have some checks, some guardrails. You know, it can be abused. Cybersecurity is an issue. Data protection is an issue. So we're still working on that framework. Now, back to your question. That's where leveraging on African Free Trade Agreement as on a regional platform is of use to Nigeria in setting up this digital framework.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome very much.
Well, thanks for staying with us. Remember, our social media handles and email is here for you to reach out with your views, questions, or thoughts. And do you want to watch this all over again? Please go to Channels TV on YouTube, search for Newsnight on that playlist, and take your pick. Well, this is where we call it a day. Till next time, take care.